Well, hello, coaches. Welcome back. It's Coach KW here again. This is actually my second try at making this video today. It's been, now about 12 hours since I started the first time, finished a whole bunch of stuff, and frankly hated it all. So it takes a little bit more work to put these on than you think. On that subject, if you haven't subscribed, show me some love. Show me that the effort's worth it for you. Hit that subscribe button. About 60% of you are still not subscribed who watch, which is better from the 70-30 split. We're down to 60-40, and the numbers are growing really healthily. But I'd love to keep that momentum up. If you haven't subscribed, please do. It helps me know that I'm reaching people who find this valuable, and it's worth my while to spend 12 plus hours on making videos for you. Today we're going to talk about defending in the 9v9. We've looked at attacking, we've looked at the basic shapes, we've looked at playing out of the back, we've looked at pressing, and the natural follow-on from pressing is just the general defensive principle. So we're going to take a look in this video, in part one of defensive structures in 9v9. We're going to take a look at big picture, use the graphs on the screen, diagrams, to look at setting up to defend in your end, setting up to defend in your attacking end, because that's even more important, I think, in 9v9, is making sure your offensive selection allows you to quickly go on the defensive and regain the ball with that counter press so that you're not defending in your own end. And we'll talk about those transition moments as well, because that's a big part of 9v9. 7v7 is a little bit more of a basketball game, up and down really quickly because the field is small. 9v9 is kind of like a slow basketball game with a few moments of breakaway, but there's more time to be patient and develop and possess the ball and progress up the field. So having that defensive structure to really counter press to keep play in the opposite end is really a really important feature. And we'll talk a little bit about 1v1 and transitions as well. In the second video, we'll then look at what real life actually brings us in game footage, because as we know, what we put up here on the board almost never looks like what it happens on the field. So we'll take a look at some of those structures out there. We'll see what's out there so that, we get a sense as to when we do our planning, how it translates to our kids and whether or not it's successful. So let's take a look at some of the graphics and we'll get through that now. Okay, so before we get into too deep on the formation sort of setup things here, you can just see my team. We happen to defend basically in a 3-4-1. I've got the other team in a 3-3-2. It doesn't really matter. But let's take a look. Let's just remind ourselves of those principles of defending, because what you're going to do when you're working with your team is to really reinforce these pretty basic concepts. So when we talk about defending, the typical out of possession principles of play are obviously to delay, to slow down that team from making progress towards your own goal. Having depth, having multiple layers, having compaction, making the field small by bringing your players into an area to make it hard to play through. We need to have balance so that if one player is lost their 1v1 battle, we have somebody else that can come in and take care of that. And probably the most important piece that youth players struggle with is obviously the patience. Everybody wants to win the ball right away. And as you go up the ladder in terms of ability and speed and quality of the players, more patience is what you need, because you take that swing at the ball, you miss it, you're completely out of the play, and then you're now numbers down as you go. So patience is probably one of the hardest ones to keep working on, that 1v1 and multiple team defending. So keep that in mind when we look at some of these things. So as I said, we've got our players here in our sort of basic formation. And if you go way back in my channel, again, I have a video out there about dividing the field. Both in attacking and defending, it's so useful to think about the field in these zones. You have your left and right channels, you've got your center channel, and you've got your two half spaces in between those areas. And it's really easy to mark and visualize by using the edges of the 18 and the edges of the 6 to keep that in mind. And it really now helps focus your ability to defend, because now it just helps draw those lines literally to say, where's the most important dangerous area and where is less danger. So clearly, the center channel is the most dangerous. It's in front of the net, gives you the best opportunity to take a shot with the most angles on goal. Next important are the half spaces on either side. As we talked in that video about how you divide up the field, and also in many attacking videos, those half spaces are critical because they're a transition zone. Usually players and balls moving through those zones force defenders to make choices to either follow the player they had or stay and let somebody go. And so that's why those areas are the next most dangerous. They're still in front of the net. They give a good angle towards the goal, but also there's those movements in there that make or break a lot of defenses. And then lastly, the wide channels, the left and right channels. Obviously, a lot of teams will play out to that wide area. We do. Lots of teams do to help stretch a defense. And then, of course, playing crosses into the box. And so it's really helpful to think about those areas and to think about how you're structuring your team, no matter what the formation is, how you're going to cover those areas and what roles and responsibilities you place on your players for those specific areas. So for me, even from 7v7 and now in 11v11, I keep the wide areas simple. My wide 7 and 11, their defensive responsibility is their opposite number. So they're going to be basically playing 1v1 the entire game against whoever else is on the field for the other team occupying those spaces. And so it becomes pretty straightforward for those players to understand their role. Your job is to deal with the person who's tried to stop you when you had the ball. If it's on the strong side, they're chasing that player and trying to put on pressure to keep them wide and minimize their ability to cross the ball. If they're on the weak side, that urgency to get back isn't as strong, but it's super important for them to keep an eye on their marker. If their marker is racing into the box from the weak side, then they have to be alert to it. If their marker is just lazily coming up the field, then as long as they're in contact with them, they're able to maybe take a little bit of a breather. And as we'll see in another slide, they could also perform another role, but they need to be turned on to make sure that, hey, if something happens from the strong side where one of the players on the weak side has gone over and left a gap, they might be the player that steps in and takes care of that. In the center channels, you've got your center backs, however you arrange them, whether, groups of 4 or groups of 3, and you have your central midfielders, which act as a screen in front of your center backs. And the idea here is you're trying to wedge them out. You can almost make that triangle shape. You're trying to wedge the other team to push them to one side of the field or the other. Go back to the pressing video because we just talked about that. It's all about making play predictable. If you can get them to one side of the field, you can lock them there with your numerical superiority and have a better chance at winning the ball back. Now, I talked about that weak side winger a second ago. We'll also talk about the striker. The striker is an important component in any defense, and it's not always for the reasons that some people think. The striker has really 2 jobs. First, they need to be an outlet if you win the ball back to have some target player to try and move the ball up to. Nothing's more frustrating is when you see a team all collapse down, they win the ball, and there's no place to go, and so they're immediately pressed because they have no outlet. So the striker's job, first, is to be that outlet. They need to shadow the side of the ball, so they need to shuttle back and forth across the top of the pitch there, to be in a general vicinity so that if the ball is won, perhaps by the center back, and they happen to look up, they see a friendly face up the field to help relieve the pressure. The second job that striker does is they defend the center backs. If it's a good team that knows to turn around and play possession if they can't get through someplace, the easiest thing to do is to turn around and play it back to the center backs where there's less pressure and they can move the ball around. If your striker stays where they need to be, they become a nuisance. They begin to make that pass more uncomfortable. So I like to tell my strikers as well, you're defending the center backs. Don't feel like you're not doing anything because the ball is down below near the 6-yard box or something or in the corner and you're just standing up there by yourself. Your job is be available and make sure that the center backs don't have an easy retrieval if the ball comes to them. Now, we talked about that weak side wide player. Many times that weak side wide player can be the second outlet because if the ball is lost on one side, usually the weak side player wasn't that involved and they can release quickly to get back up the field to either be a supporting player for that striker or be an out-and-out relief valve to get that ball diagonally depending where it's won on the pitch. Maybe it's won a little bit more centrally and your midfielder or your defender has the opportunity to play that ball diagonally out to one side. A lot of times there's a lot of open space because the center backs on the other team have shifted over to support the ball, leaving one half of the field empty. So it's really important while defending to make sure you have outlets and your teams know on transition where to look if they win the ball so you can stop defending because nobody likes defending. The other component, again, going back to the principles of play and the pressing video, is that when defending, if done properly, you're always going to outnumber the other team. Unless the other team is pressing every player forward, you will have 8 players, give or take, behind the ball, including your keeper. Whereas the other team, unless they're risking it all, are probably going to leave at least 2 center backs and their keeper back. So automatically, you're up 2 players versus what they have. So again, for the pressing video, if you can use your compact shape to now lock a team to one side, you can use your numerical superiority to gang up on the ball carrier, win that ball, and try and transition out of your half of the field. This graphic, again, is from that pressing video, and it just shows, again, the whole concept of you're going to have more numbers on the ball than not. And so being able to lock a team to one side is really important. So being able to get your players to recognize, hey, the ball's over there. How can we keep it there? And then how can we bring extra players to bear to keep them from moving it someplace on the free side of the field? Now, that's more of when you're setting up team defense in your area. But again, as I said before, the better place to be defending is in the opponent's half. And so whatever your attacking formation is, and you've seen videos on the one I like to use, one of the key pieces of it is it also provides lots of players around the ball, not just for possession, but when you lose the ball, lots of players there to try and stop the quick counterattack. Because again, as we talked about, 7v7, it's like a basketball game, up and down. 9v9, it's a little slower basketball game. It's not as a patient buildup as 11v11 can be at grade 7 and 8, just because the distances are further. But there is a little bit more time to develop and move the ball several passes before getting from point A to point B. But the point being is, if you can win that ball back before it turns into that moment of coming at your goal, then your attacking shape should provide for enough players around the ball that you can put that counter press on. And with those players around the ball, if you can maintain your attacking shape, it tends to turn into a really strong defending shape up in front of the ball, where we're putting pressure on the ball carrier. We're making sure our players in the back have covered the danger areas or are starting to drop if the player on the ball has time to look up and maybe play a ball in behind. But you've got lots of players in between you and your net because your attacking shape maintains that structure. Not everybody is pushed to the top of the pitch, leaving your center backs all by themselves. And here's that web that we looked at in the formation video and the attacking video. Notice how there's just so much interconnectedness from my team, even in attack, that when we lose the ball, it's so difficult for teams to play through it because there's players everywhere they want to go, even when we're supposedly attacking them. We're in a really good defensive shape right off the bat, so we can try and win that ball back as fast as possible. Well, I think I'm going to leave it there for today. As I said, the first version of this video was hitting 30 minutes when I tried to put too much into it, and I hated it all. So I think we'll stop here. We'll make it short, sweet, and simple. The second video with the live action stuff is going to come out only a couple of days later. So make sure you hit the notification bell in YouTube so you know when it comes out, because usually I try to do one a week, but these two I'm going to try to just bookend since they kind of go together. The concepts I have here are the same basic concepts that work from 7v7 to 11v11. And I have 2 videos on my channel way back in the 7v7 times about defensive roles. It's a 2-parter for each of the positions on the field. I literally go over the defensive roles and responsibilities of the keeper, the pair of center backs, the wide players, a central player, and that high striker. And all those roles and responsibilities still apply to 9v9 or 11v11. That's why I love this 2-3-1. It literally teaches every single role that you need in the game going forward, whether it's defensive pairing, wide players, central players, keepers, or strikers. All happens in that 7v7 game. That's why it's my favorite format. So if you need be, go back, take a look at that. If you have any questions, comments, or thoughts as to other things you might want to know, please get them in the comments. The pressing video was a direct result of a viewer's comment saying, hey, I watched your playing out of the back. How can I defeat that? And that's where the pressing video was born. So if you've got something you have a question about, get it in here. Maybe I can create something. My regular season doesn't start for another 2 or 3 weeks, so I won't have as much regular video from practices and new games. I got one more preseason practice that I'll get some video from. But if you've got a question and I can work it into my practice schedule, that's where I'll film it. I film a lot of my practices so that A, I can review things, and B, it gives me content that I can show to you. So nothing more this time. Watch for the other video real soon. Remember, hit that bell icon to get the notifications. Hope you're having a great preseason if that's the time that you're watching this. I'll see you real soon out in the fields. Bye-bye.